Well, I guess I'm not the only one that isn't all that surprised that Antonio Brown ended up with the Oakland Raiders. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I know the Buffalo Bills reports were out there and they ultimately ended up not coming to pass. And especially once that happened, I'm like, he probably ends up with the Raiders. And lo and behold, the Antonio Brown saga and where he's going to play in 2019 has finally resolved itself as the Oakland Raiders sent a third and fifth round pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers for the future Hall of Famer Antonio Brown. Wow. Things escalated quickly there in Pittsburgh, didn't they? Or maybe not really. In terms of this trade and everything that's went into it and all of that, I think it's important to provide full and complete context. Now, you're going to have those that'll focus on Antonio Brown and blame Antonio Brown solely and talk about, like, the angry scouting vet dude or whoever he is on Twitter, that this is why Antonio Brown was dropped down draft boards in 2010, and that's why he went in the 6th round. You know what? If I was a general manager or a team president and owner and my scouting department told me they were dropping a guy like Antonio Brown to the 6th round, and then all these years later, he ended up being a Hall of Fame level player, I would want all of their asses fired. Like, what dumb logic to use? Oh, he's a bit of a headache and a pain in the ass. He's going to be in Canton someday. I'll take a little bit of pain in the ass, thank you very much. Give me the Hall of Fame talent. Give me a break. As far as Antonio Brown and Big Ben and their relationship, the reality is that Big Ben is a much bigger problem in a lot of ways due to his lack of leadership, his personality, than a lot, especially in the media, seem to want to make it out to be. Yes, you could talk about Le'Veon Bell, you could talk about Antonio Brown, and sure, they could have at times conducted themselves better. There's no question about that. But let's look at Big Ben a little bit here too. But the reality is this deal for Antonio Brown was not about Big Ben. It was not about the Steelers. It was not about getting away from the Steelers. When in doubt, always follow the money. And in this particular case, the number one primary sole reason Antonio Brown attempted to create leverage when he had none, ended up being able to gain leverage when he should have had none, and got himself a new deal was because he had no guaranteed money left on his deal. And whether or not you think the Steelers would have let him see the end of his deal with, 3 more years left and however much money it was, the bottom line was Antonio Brown was looking at it clearly from a situation of, I have nothing guaranteed, so if I get hurt, I make no more money guaranteed. I want guaranteed money. I feel like I've earned, merited, deserved guaranteed money. And by God, as part of this deal with the Raiders, he and his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, were able to exercise leverage that, in theory, they really shouldn't have had. And in the process, got Antonio Brown a reworked deal with 3 years at $50-something million, even with some incentives thrown in there. And most importantly of all, for Antonio Brown, $30 million guaranteed. Like, if you look at this from Antonio Brown's standpoint, and you say, what were his priorities? Clearly, his priorities were he wanted guaranteed money that he didn't have currently, and he probably wanted to change the scenery to get the hell out of Pittsburgh. Those being his priorities, he accomplished both of them and accomplished them very well. It's really hard to knock Antonio Brown, even if you don't like the way he conducted himself and carried himself. You think he quit on his team. You thought he was idiotic in his interviews. You think his blonde mustache looks ridiculous. You thought he was terrible on The Masked Singer. All of that! The bottom line is this dude got himself out of a situation he didn't want to be, and in the process got paid. He's got $30 million guaranteed reasons why he can tolerate playing under John Gruden now. Like, how are we knocking Antonio Brown? And this whole thing of, well, you left the Steelers. Good luck with that. You know, maybe good luck with that. Yes, that's true. But this whole notion of he should have stayed with a winner. You know, like, I look at it in the real world. I work for a top 5 U.S. bank in terms of credit card business and in terms of just overall deposits. If a bank that was number 1 in that category said to me, we want you to come here, but we're going to pay you less money to do so. The fuck do you think I would do? I'd turn that shit down all the time. Why? Because it's about the money at the end of the day. That's the reality of it. And why the fuck would I care if this bank's winning hugely and they're number one, whereas mine is top five? The top five bank's doing a better job of taking care of me. I'm going to stay there. The wins aren't that important. And the reality is for a guy like Antonio Brown, wins and losses are nice, especially wins. Be nice to have a Super Bowl, but I'm not costing myself millions and millions of dollars for something that I may or may not ever get. And after all those years in Pittsburgh, if he didn't get it by now, what the fuck makes you think he would get it anytime soon there? They didn't even make the playoffs themselves this year. So in the process, he leaves one messy situation for another messy situation, and in the process, at least gets a bunch more guaranteed money, knowing eventually the team in the Raiders is going to move to Vegas, where last time I checked, they have no state income tax in the state of Nevada. It's like a win-win-win all the way around for him. And as far as the Raiders, now look, I could totally question the logic here of saying you didn't want to pay an elite edge rusher like Khalil Mack, who's younger in the prime of his career, big-time money at a more premium position, but you're willing to give up a couple of draft picks to bring in a wide receiver who is a bit of a head case, who is a bit of a locker room challenge, and pay him big-time elite money when he's over the age of 30. That feels a little odd, I can't lie. You basically took the savings from Khalil Mack and applied them towards Antonio Brown, when Antonio Brown, let's face it, plays a less important position in the National Football League. It's questionable. That said, paying Khalil Mack, the defense of the Raiders stunk anyways, and they still stunk without him. So what was the difference? Fair point. Also, you look at it and you say, they were able to trade away Amari Cooper, who is a significantly lesser player than Antonio Brown, got a first-round pick in return for said lesser player, and in the process, yes, got an older player, but a much better elite-level player with still a couple of elite seasons left in him in theory, and only had to give up a third and fifth-round pick to do so. So basically, if you want to look at it in the Amari Cooper versus Antonio Brown comparison, the Oakland Raiders gave up Amari Cooper a third and a fifth-round pick in order to get Antonio Brown in a first-round pick. If you were a GM, would you do this deal? You'd be nuts not to. Like, this is the type of shit you would propose in Madden and it would get shot down. In the reality, though, it happened. And as far as the Raiders are already a mess, yes. And we'll see how it works out with Antonio Brown working with Gruden and working with Derek Carr. But the bottom line is the Raiders needed to do something. They needed to do something. Antonio Brown's better right now than clearly any of the receivers in this 2019 draft class. And even young receivers take time to develop usually. So why not roll the dice? If anything, the teams that look like losers here are the 49ers, the Jets, the Packers. All teams with a need for a difference-making elite-level wide receiver for their quarterbacks. In the case of the 49ers and the Jets, young quarterbacks. In terms of the Packers, one of the best in the business in Aaron Rodgers. All these teams had draft picks to trade. All of these teams had salary cap space, and none of them made the move. They look ridiculous in the process. You could talk about head cases and this and that. You worry about that shit later. When you get the chance to acquire elite talent, which Antonio Brown most certainly is, head case or not, when you get the chance to acquire elite talent and only have to give up a third and fifth round pick to do so, your answer should be sign me the fuck up. Now, are the Steelers really winners or losers here? I guess it depends. They're going to carry a shit ton of caps, a dead cap here with this Antonio Brown deal, but still end up saving about $1 million under the salary cap this year. And all that dead cap is rolled into 2019, which is a good thing. They've kind of isolated it in that 1 year. Third and fifth round pick return for an elite wide receiver at age 31. You wonder, could you have gotten maybe a second and fourth? Maybe a second and a third and fourth next year, something along those lines. Or maybe this was the best that they could get on the market and they had to take something before they got absolutely nothing and had to deal with potentially months more of bigger problems. I don't know. I think to me you have to look at this from a Steelers perspective more than just it being about draft pick compensation in return, dead cap versus cap space saved, da-da-da-da-da. The reality is the Steelers are a fucking mess in terms of their locker room, in terms of their personalities. Chemistry's bad and everybody fucking knows it. And they're not going to fire the head coach no matter how much they should. They can't cut the quarterback because he's there. He's a Hall of Famer. Le'Veon Bell is being shown the door. So be it. You got rid of one of the two problems, you would argue, that you could actually get rid of. In the case of Antonio Brown, it comes to a point in time where the Steelers, who can actually evaluate the wide receiver position really, really well. You think about that 2010 draft, that was a draft that got both Emmanuel Sanders and Antonio Brown. And Antonio Brown was a 6th-round pick. You look at Juju Smith-Schuster, he was a 2nd-round pick. What could they potentially get out of James Washington? 2nd-round pick. I trust the Steelers front office and their talent evaluators to be able to find another dude at the wide receiver position. Their history indicates that they can do so. So there shouldn't be a big panic about what you lose in Antonio Brown, because the reality is you probably gain more in terms of getting that distraction out of the locker room. You gain more in terms of leveling out the personalities on that team. And again, I don't say that to excuse Big Ben, because his lack of leadership is striking. His lack of leadership is concerning, and his lack of leadership, along with Mike Tomlin's, is why this team every year does dumb shit like losing to really bad teams on the road. They do it year after year, just like they did with the Broncos and the Raiders in back-to-back weeks this past fucking season. But this could be a situation for the Steelers of addition by subtraction. For teams like the 49ers, the Jets, and the Packers, this felt like stagnation via stupidity. All three of those teams could have made great case examples as to why they should have went after Antonio Brown, and ultimately, regardless of if they did or they didn't get the job done, which is ridiculous. Elite level talent like this, even over the age of 30, even with a big cap figure the next couple of seasons, you're in positions where you need to do something to shake some shit up and help your quarterback, and you failed to do so. If I was one of those quarterbacks, I'd be pissed. And as far as the Raiders go, the thing about trading Mack and trading Cooper, the reality is it comes down to what general manager Mike Mayock and head coach John Gruden do with those picks. If they hit home runs, then they look like geniuses. If they hit singles or doubles or maybe strike out on one of those picks, they look like morons. And it is that simple. But when evaluating Antonio Brown and the possibility of banging him in, even with the fact he could be a pain in the ass and a head case and an idiot at times, he is too good, he is too talented, and too often these types of guys do not come available. And when you can sit there and get a guy like that and only have to give up a 3rd or 5th round pick to do so, you have to do that every single time. Every single time. So yes, there will still be people talking shit about Antonio Brown. F them. They'd be doing the same shit that he did in this situation. And if they say they don't, they're fucking lying. If you've got the opportunity to create leverage that shouldn't exist to be able to get yourself more guaranteed money when your shelf life in terms of your profession is very limited and you were in the second half of that shelf life, you have to do something like this. You do something like this and you make it happen. Fuck anybody that pretends like they wouldn't do the same damn thing. Because I know I most certainly would. And I do not knock Antonio Brown one damn single little bit for doing what was best for him and his business. Get over this fanboyish bullshit about it's all about the Super Bowls. Nah, fuck it. At the end of the day, it's about getting paid, laid, and made. Antonio Brown's doing all three of those just fine. It's not like he's winning Super Bowls in Pittsburgh anyways. Might as well do what's best financially for him and his family for the future. And who knows what could happen in the NFL over the next couple of years. The Raiders could hit it big in the draft. Bring in some notable guys. And they could be a contender. They could not be. Same thing with the Steelers. At least Antonio Brown now has over 30 million guaranteed reasons why he's happy he forced his way out of Pittsburgh. And I can't blame him one damn bit.